Engineer Dorcas Bushday, we're so grateful that you joined us in this program. And I believe my congratulations are in order. You have been the first Ghanaian, as well as the first woman to be appointed, the head of the Federation of African Engineering Organizations. Your appointment comes at an uncertain time. We're talking of COVID-19. What exactly do you bring on board?
Let me say that COVID-19 has exposed a lot of difficulties that we have in the way we do our things. But it's also brought in a lot of opportunities. As an engineer, my main skill, which is what every good engineer has, is the ability to solve complex problems.
Exactly.
And this can't get any more complex than it is at the moment, solving the kinds of problems that this COVID has exposed. I believe I bring on board an ability to solve such problems and many years of experience in working with different people, leading teams and getting things done. The kinds of things that we need to consider in solving a problem like this are not your typical engineering problem, where the exact things, you are dealing with exact things, but you are dealing with people, you are dealing with governments, you are dealing with different countries, and so on. One of the things that COVID exposed was the fact that if you were in a situation where all your country's borders were closed, no goods coming in, no services coming in, can you survive? So it made us realize that we need to be far more self-reliant than we are now, which means we need to encourage our own people to be able to produce the kinds of things that we need to survive. If we need equipment, we should be able to produce it ourselves. It means a whole lot of things, like we need to encourage innovation in the country. At the moment, we haven't paid too much attention to our own people, innovating and producing things and so on. And when they do, it's left with them to even try and market what they've done. We haven't relied on our own selves for services, like consulting services when it comes to construction of roads and bridges and buildings and so on. As soon as it's big, a tendency is for governments to fall on outsiders to do that. And I think that COVID has exposed the errors in this kind of thinking, and we need to make sure that we can be self-reliant as countries within Africa and pool our resources together and be able to do things ourselves.
I'll come back to the issue about innovation and government support, but during your investiture speech, you made it clear that we need engineering to at least attain SDGs, not just in Ghana, but across Africa. I want to read sections of your statement. You said that a closer look at some of other goals will show that engineering inputs are also required to achieve them. For example, Goal 3, good health and well-being. Goal 4, quality education will require infrastructure, and equipment that are the purview of engineering practitioners. Well, COVID-19, in your words, has exposed the inefficiency of infrastructure in these two areas. So, time in and time out, before COVID-19, we had engineers. What did you get wrong?
Let me say, engineers didn't get anything wrong. I shall not say who got it wrong.
Sure.
But I do not believe that it's something that engineers got wrong. If we take these two areas, for example, when you say education, COVID-19 made us realize that we needed better communication systems. If children were to continue in school throughout the pandemic, we needed to be able to use modern technology to reach them in their homes for teachers to teach them. As engineers, we've always known the potential of communication links. We've always known the potential of the internet and so on. But we need governments to understand how useful they are, everybody knows on the surface that these things are useful, but then COVID-19 made people realize that it's not just a fancy thing or not just useful in this thing sense, but in a very practical sense and a very real sense, you need it. You need to be able to communicate, and I think that this pandemic has made governments around the world understand that communication, good communication, is not just some fancy thing. It is as essential as breathing good air. So that's one of the things it has exposed.
Does it also not expose the fact that the infrastructure, the design approach to most of these sectors wasn't futuristic?
Well, let me say, when it comes to communication like this, you needed excellent communication links, which involved mostly fiber. And you needed to have that vision, first of all, to make sure that you've got the backbone that is needed to reach every part of the country. And you've got the money to do the last line to different facilities and so on. And I can tell you that that idea for having a backbone has been on paper for several years. It's the implementation that has fallen a bit short. We even are in a better situation than many other countries now, I would say, because of the competition that we've introduced in our telecom industry. We had so many companies in the telecom industry that drove the competition. We now have a few, but we still are able to drive the competition because we have more than one company, this thing doing that. So it was a good decision many years ago to privatize and get in private companies and so on. And we would have to look at what we can do to make sure that we're reaching every single area of the country.
All right. Engineer, let's now talk about the Continental Free Trade Agreement area, because we're looking at a market value of $3.5 trillion annually. Well, you have also posited that, the Federation is going to play a key role in the harmonization of standards to ensure that there is a level playing field. How are you going to improve upon your presence in this regard?
Okay, with this African Free Trade Agreement, everything is fine on paper to say, oh, from January 1st, 2021, we have this agreement, you can now trade all over Africa. But when it comes to engineering services, engineering products, and so on, you now have to think about the standards. Do we have uniform standards across the continent? And we don't in several areas. So you may be producing sockets, for example, in Ghana. You can't send them to South Africa because they use a different type of socket there. So there are all these little things that need to be sorted out. And I said FIRE was in the best position to do this because it's the only organization on the continent that brings together all engineering organizations. FIRE is not only registering the individual professional engineering institutions, but FIRE is also registering any company within engineering practice. So mining companies, telecom companies, electricity distributors, anything. So we are in a good position to bring these entities together and discuss things and talk about harmonizing standards. In addition, we have an MOU with the AU that is to do just this kind of thing.
Okay.
And so the AU is looking to FIRE to help do these things within the engineering sector. And that is what I hope to lead. And I will be looking at the different sectors on the continent, the way they operate. So the energy sector, the extractive mineral sector, construction sector, and so on. And we'll be forming committees, getting companies, those stakeholders who are involved, getting them together to start talking about harmonizing standards. This is going to be a tall order. I know it's not going to be something that will happen overnight because you have many different interests involved, but it will be done.
But have you started talks with the Secretariat of the Continental Free Trade on this particular initiative?
Not yet. We haven't. So it has mainly been the AU and our dealings with the AU. But certainly we will engage after. Fortunately, they are here in Ghana, the Secretariat,
exactly.
and we shall certainly be paying them a visit.
We do know that outstanding issues that are yet to be addressed and thereafter include that of the rules of origin and even that of the harmonization of standards. Paint for us a picture. How would AFTA look like without harmonization of standards?
Without harmonization of standards, we will not be able to take full advantage of the agreement.
Okay.
So a country may have a product, but it won't be accepted in some other countries, or it won't be useful in some other countries because it doesn't meet the standards in those countries.
Okay.
So without that harmonization, AFTA will look good on paper, but it will never realize its full potential.
Engineer, you hold 35 years of rich experience in structural engineering and every form that comes with it. And I was going through your profile, and one thing that caught my attention was your input in the issues of earthquakes. And you've played a huge role in Ghana when it comes to that. But it begs to question, because we at JoyNews keep reporting stories about how various communities are exposed. Should there be a tremor? Should there be an earthquake or whatnot? What remains the current situation of how exposed we are, if not prepared, for a potential earthquake in Ghana?
Let's say that we are exposed to a potentially disastrous earthquake. Now, an earthquake will be disastrous depending on how prepared our buildings are. They are the ones that, and all our other infrastructure, they are the ones that, when they fail, they cause death and damage and destruction and so on. So the question, how prepared are we? I would say we are not very prepared simply because we have a lot of buildings already in existence, and many of which were not constructed in a manner that would ensure that they can resist a disastrous earthquake. Let me add that the knowledge of how to build to withstand earthquakes is fairly new. The knowledge of how to build our modern buildings, it's fairly new. It has been evolving over the years. After each disastrous earthquake, we have learned what has gone wrong and we have improved. And I believe we are now at a stage where we have the knowledge to be able to build for the kind of earthquake we can ever expect in Ghana. The kinds of earthquake we expect to happen in Ghana, we expect a maximum of around 7 or so. And in other countries, they've had earthquakes of 7 points, bigger than 7, and nothing has been destroyed. That's because most of the buildings have been built properly. So now what we need to do is to ensure that all new buildings are following a proper code, and to look at the old buildings and start to retrofit the old buildings so that they won't cause death, they won't be destroyed in a manner that we would make them completely useless. But that is a tall order. If you look at the number of buildings already in existence, there's a lot of work to be done. But we need to start from somewhere. And in other countries, they start from the critical facilities, so like health facilities and educational facilities. You start from those, then you retrofit as you go along. And that's what we need to be doing.
Still on that, in 2019, you chaired a government committee on issues regarding Ghana's earthquake hazard, risk assessment. And I want to just use the determinants talking about Ghana's earthquake preparedness and response. What is the state of this currently? Throwing back to what you did in 2019.
Okay. There's we are a little better prepared than we were at that time.
Okay.
Let me say, COVID has helped in that regard, because some of the recommendations that we made at the time was that we needed to have health facilities that were not just concentrated in Accra, but were all over the country. And I believe because of the pandemic, that is one of the decisions that the government has made. Because an earthquake can strike anywhere at any time, and you cannot depend on being able to rush everybody to Kolubu. So you need to have the ambulances, you need to have those health facilities. But the other recommendations that we made, we need to know how vulnerable our buildings are. I can say offhand that, oh, maybe a lot of buildings will collapse, but I don't know for sure because we have not done proper vulnerability assessments. And there are ways to do that. I'm hoping that the next census will be able to give enough information on buildings in the country so that they can be analyzed for us to say this percentage of buildings we need to be careful, or buildings in this area, oh please, we need to retrofit immediately because they have been built in this way or this manner. So there is a lot of work to be done, but at least there is a framework now within which that work needs to be done.
Engineer Bushdid, I mean, you hold this position which genuinely is male-dominated. Engineering is really male-dominated. When I came in here and I saw these frames, I was just overwhelmed by the males in this picture, and just you at the corner there. What does it take for a personality like yourself to hold this pressure?
Let me say that for myself, I haven't thought too much about it. For me, it's never really been too different from, let me say, what I've been doing since school days. So let me add that I did my sixth form in Presec, which was a boys' school, and from then on, it's been males all around. I was the only female in the class, so I've become used to being surrounded by males. And I think in general, the engineers I was working with also became used to be. They even forgot I was female.
but what responsibility did it bring along, you know?
Let me say, the responsibilities maybe are only showed themselves, you know, when other females started to come into the profession. I recall when I was working, when the first other female came to join me and so on. And I realized I needed to, you know, help, mentor, and so on, and guide them through, because they were new to it. They had different experiences from I did. You know, I had, when I was in school, I didn't have any, you know, female mates to talk to or compare notes and so on. But in general, they were in a better position. There were other females around and so on. And I think that it was a little more difficult for them. So I realized that I had a mentoring role to play. And I think I did that to the best of my ability.
Great. Let's look at the national picture when it comes to female participation, or, you know, female taking up roles in the engineering space. How has Ghana fared?
I don't think Ghana is faring too well at the moment. There was a time when they had done quite well and gotten quite a few females in the university. But now, as a proportion, I believe it's between 15 to 20%, which is not good at all. Worldwide, it's around 30%, which is also not good. But the surprising thing is that in some of the Asian and Arab countries, they have passed 50%. So it's doable. You know, there are some countries that are going past 50%. So it's not something that cannot be done.
Interestingly, I also wanted to ask you, whenever you sit behind your desk, what are the kind of the fears that, you know, you have within this industry as a female engineer?
Well, I'm not sure whether it's as a female engineer or as an engineer, but I think that sometimes our work is not appreciated enough, and that people need to recognize what engineers do and how important they are. I mean, you can't do anything without engineering. In certain fields, I think it's a real problem. I know in the biomedical engineering field, the biomedical engineers I interact with, for example, do not feel that they are given enough recognition. But you must realize that these days you cannot do, I mean, even a simple illness to be diagnosed, the doctors do not depend on years of experience like before. Look at you, take your heart and say, oh, you've got this or that. No, they need some analysis done somewhere, and it's done with equipment before they can come up with a decision. So it's just that we are not being properly recognized, and I think that should change. That is one of the things that we will try to do, working with different companies and so on, to give better recognition to engineering practice. For female engineers, I know that there are still quite a few problems in many organizations, and organizations like those who do the oil, those who work on the oil rigs and so on.
Exactly.
They have these problems. They have these problems when they are expecting children in different companies and so on. And all these are things that we need to talk about. We need to work with these companies and come up with good policies that are friendly to female engineers. We cannot do things the way we are doing now. It cannot be business as usual. And it's one of the things that I really intend to work on at FIO. With the companies, we will start to identify companies that FIO believes are doing the right thing. And we will name them and we'll list them as preferred companies, put them in a category so that you know that these are companies you can deal with. And the kinds of things that we will look at are, how do these companies treat the environment? How do these companies treat their female engineers? Because one of the things I said was we are looking for diversity. How are these companies friendly to people with disabilities? And we will look at all these things and use it to rate the companies and put them in a category for you to know that these are FIO preferred companies that you can deal with. And I believe that this will go some way to helping to address the kind of situation that we have now.
All right, just before I forget, I wanted you to also list for us the priorities as you've now taken a role as president of the of FIO.
Okay, one of my main priorities, I actually listed 4 different areas in which I would be working. And one of the main priorities is in ensuring that the continent has a competent, diverse group of engineering practitioners and engineering industries.
Okay.
We need to know, they must also be sufficient for our needs. So we will be working with all the different countries to make sure that we are training enough. We'll be looking at accreditation of engineering institutions, and in that we are working closely with the Federation of Engineering Institutions in Asia and Pacific, and then the International Engineering Alliance, so that we bring up standards to international levels. Then I'll also be looking at our secretariat and as an organization, ensuring that we have the competence, we have the funds and so on necessary to carry out our duties. And then we'll also be trying to promote research on the continent. We'll be trying to promote innovation and making sure that we get to the stage where we are quite self-sufficient, and we can also be counted on the world stage as a continent that brings innovation to the world.
That's great. Now, there was this article published by Dutch Welle way back in 2020, and they described Accra as the cement jungle. Why? Because we often do not adapt to green, building. And with it came the subsequent concern about the upspring of various slums across, the periphery of Accra. Based on your experience as well, not just within this field, but building construction and whatnot, how best do you think we can change this narrative?
I think that it's planning, and we always do plans, but we don't stick to them. So it's a question of making the plans and sticking to them. And you stick to something when you really understand its value. And I think sometimes we don't understand the value of greenery and so on. We don't understand the value of keeping our environments clean. So it's a question of maybe educating people and making sure that they understand. The slums we have, there was supposed to be a program to upgrade these slums. And I believe that slums can be upgraded. Now, the slums are not just a problem in Ghana. They're a problem all over Africa. And I believe it's one of the areas in which we can throw a challenge to the engineering community. Come up with simple buildings that can be put up quickly, cheaply, so that we can replace some of these buildings in slum areas. I don't believe that we have ever thrown that challenge properly. You see that people are innovative, but you need to challenge them. And I don't think that we are challenging our engineers enough. We always throw up our hands. When COVID came, you saw all sorts of innovations coming up to do with washing of hands and so on. If you challenge people, they will come up with something.
So it's something you're going to take up?
It's something I will take up.
What about your expert advice on how to ensure ventilation in choked cities and choked towns amid COVID-19?
Ventilation as in?
The construction of buildings and ensuring that the situation of most of these buildings, how they could be situated to ensure proper ventilation.
Oh, okay. That is, let me say, usually that would be the purview of architects and the electrical, the services engineers and so on. But COVID has also shown us the importance of having your buildings properly ventilated. This virus seems to spread more where you have enclosed areas. I understand even the air conditioning systems that we used for public places, they are also supposed to filter out the air if it's properly designed. But because most of the time we don't value our engineers, we don't call them in, and we just put in air conditioning systems, and the same air is circulated around, the same viruses move around, infect people in the room. But we are supposed to filter out the air. We are supposed not to circulate the same air, especially in public spaces. So I would advise anybody